Today we are, or I am, going to do a little seminar using some puzzles and games and information that I've made up over the years to try to explain the way that the mind works and how we can use that and maybe change your thinking to get more creative. And as I go through this, again, there'll be some stories and some things that I'll do. First of all, I guess I want to start with the brain. We're all supposed to have one of those and use those to function in everyday life. And the purpose of the brain is to make order of our world according to what we think our order should be, and to solve problems and also to determine the value of things. Because we get a lot of stimuli coming at us on a second-by-second basis. Every second of every day, all the hairs on your body are sending information to your brain to analyze. Every sound that you hear is sending information to your brain to analyze. Every smell, everything is being pushed at you to try to make sense of it, try to put it in some type of order. And that's almost impossible, even for the brain, as it is an amazing organ that it is. So we have to determine what's valuable and what's not valuable, so that we can kind of take care of the important stuff and then put the non-important stuff to the side. Right? And those are decisions that you and I make on the basis of what we've done through our life and through our history and through our experiences. We determine, nobody else does, we determine your own individual importance towards things. Once we figure out what has some importance, then what we try to do is come up with what I call a right answer. So we try to find the right answer to our problem, so then now we can move on to figure out what the next thing is that we need to solve, and the next thing that we need to solve. Again, as those things come at you, the importance of them will change. For example, we can filter out things that we think are not important. Let's say you're out in the woods, you're going on a nice hike, and you're just traveling around and having a good old time, and all of a sudden you get a rock in your shoe. All of a sudden that rock becomes pretty important because it's disturbing your hike and it's digging into your shoe or digging into your foot, and it makes it difficult for you to walk. So you sit down and start to take your shoe off to get the rock out. And out of the corner of your eye, you picture Mother Bear and her baby charging at you. All of a sudden that rock doesn't seem as important as it was before. Because the most important thing now is for you to get up and get out of there so that you don't get into a confrontation with the bear. So your mind blocks out that rock and puts the important thing, the bear coming at you, as up front and the most important thing available, so let's get out of here. By the same token, we can let things through that are important. A mother sleeping in her bedroom, there's traffic going on, there's crickets outside, there's sirens going off, maybe it's raining. There's a lot of stimulus coming at you, and here she is, she's sleeping away. But her newborn baby that's 2 doors down turns over and kind of lets out a little whimper, and that gets through, because that has importance to us. So that gets through, she wakes up and takes care of her child. So we do that on an automatic basis, pretty much without thinking about it. It just kind of happens, again, because of what we've developed over our relationship with ourselves over the years. The easiest way, I guess, for our brain to solve problems is to use pre-existing knowledge. So, how many times have you ever heard yourself, you're out driving around somewhere or you're going on vacation someplace and you look around and you say, you know, this place looks just like Rockport, or looks just like New Hampshire, or it looks just like Arizona. Because now your brain is trying to make that connection between the two, because it's easier to take something you already know, associate that with something you don't know, and say, all right, now it makes sense, this place looks just like New Hampshire. So we try to make those associations from what we have done in the past. And also that works with our eyes, with our smell. I mean, you've probably been outside and you smell something and you say, smells like somebody's cooking hamburgers. All of a sudden that creates some emotion in you. Or, oh, look, the lilacs are on, I can smell the lilacs. Or, it smells like my car engine is on fire. I said, gotta take care of that pretty quick. So as we bring all these things in and start filtering them out, we learn through a process. And then that process, we hook on to the right answer and then move on. Whether it's the right answer or not the right answer, we still hook on to it and then we move on. And only you can determine what your right answer is. But it may also put a block up so you don't look for another right answer. And I'll get into that in a second. Did y'all get one of these sheets? Now I purposely handed this out without any explanation at all, so that you can look at it. And usually what happens is some people may pick this up, look at it, and determine the value in it right away. They look at it and they say, oh, this is a bunch of puzzles. Doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm just going to put this aside and wait until Bruce explains it. That's a reality, that's the decision you make. Some people pick it up and we look at it and they say, oh, I recognize that there's some words on here, I know words, but it's not put in this same format that I'm used to reading. It's all over the place. There's words on top of words, next to words, under words, all over the place. And so you start looking at it and your brain starts working, saying, what is this? Wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. We have this thing up in the corner up here, we have ground and we have feet, ground feet. What is ground feet?
6 feet under. Yeah, that's what I said.
That's correct. As a process, you start going through that. You say, ground and feet. Yeah, I'll give these to these guys over here so they can see ground feet too.
6 feet under.
So as you're looking at this, you see feet, you see ground. Where is the ground? Where is the feet? You start trying to analyze that. And as Shauna has come up with, and say, oh, that's, how many feet do we have? We have 6 feet. Ground on top of feet, 6 feet, 6 feet underground. Say, So now you look at that one and you move on and say, oh, next to it is this. We have stand and we have an I. I stand where? On a dotted line. No, that doesn't make any sense. I understand. See, now what you're doing is you're using the information you've learned from the first one to solve the second one. So let's move on. And then we have these cycles up here. What kind of cycles are those?
Tricycle.
They're tricycles. Oh.
Crossroads.
And see, now your brain starts kicking in and saying, oh, okay, this is fun now, because I'm a smart person, and I got these ones now. I'm going to try to figure all these out. So now I got crossroads. Yeah. And then we got, what is this, dice? 2 dice here. 2 dicey. 2 dicey?
That's Daisy.
That's 2 dicey. 2 dicey for me. Dice.
Oh, that would be town in a line? Town line?
Town line. That could be town line.
Downtown.
Or downtown?
Downtown. Town line, downtown.
Degrees below 0.
Where's the line?
Over here we have
Man overboard.
3 degrees below 0. What is that dice one? That's really
2 dice?
2 dice, double dice, paradise.
Oh,
Oh,
paradise.
paradise. I get it. What do we have down here? We have death and life. Death, life, life, death.
Death over life?
Death over life.
Life after death?
Life after death. Look at that. See, now it becomes fun because now we're all playing and we're all feeding and learning off of each other. Somebody said this one earlier, this man dotted line board.
Man overboard.
Man overboard. What is the light and the need here? Lighten,
Enlighten me.
enlighten me, Bud Light,
Enlighten me.
on my knees with a light.
Enlighten me.
Keep thinking, it's getting somewhere.
Oh, the neon light?
It's a neon light!
Very good.
Oh, God.
Oh, jeez.
Oh. I might get
Two for Shauna.
You got a glance?
I'm good.
How about the one down the bottom here, we have
Oh,
lips and toes and lips.
tiptoe through the tulips?
Tiptoe through the two lips.
Yep.
That's great.
Okay.
What about the head crash one?
The head crash. Yeah, what about the head crash one?
Head on. It's like-
Oh, head on crash.
Head on crash. And my favorite, the very last one down here, inixilata.
A glance.
Yeah.
Backwards.
Exactly.
Glance backwards.
How do you say it? How do you pronounce that now?
It's a glance backwards.
It's, no, but I like the way you said it.
Oh, the first way, inixilata.
Sounds like a Mexican sandwich or something.
Mm.
That's the only one I got.
So can you see how your mind kind of processes stuff, learns from itself, keeps on going, you get those realities, and then as the realities become your standard, you kind of move on, and now you can solve other things using those as a standard,
But then you get in a rut too.
but then you get in a rut. So you should be up here. Oh, do you? The thing is, it's great to solve those things, but if your reality is based on false information, then those realities and decisions that you're making are not necessarily wrong, but they might not necessarily be right. At one time, it was known that the world was flat.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was. I mean, you were silly if you went out, past a certain point in the ocean because you were going to fall off the edge. So all the decisions that were made by everybody, all the maps, the thinking, the navigation, was based on a flat world. And then some guy, they attributed to Christopher Columbus, decided that the world was round. And when he proved that, it screwed everybody up. Because now all of their thinking, all of their theories, all of their maps and discussions and navigations were wrong. And they had to refigure those out because they had locked on to those type of ideas and made their decisions. And they weren't necessarily wrong, they were right for the time. But we found out later that they changed because they weren't based on reality. One down. So finding the right answer is good, don't get me wrong, it's very good. It's very good for survival because you want to find the right answer. When you put your hand down on a hot stove, you pretty much know what the right answer is right away. Right? Get your hand off the stove. You don't experiment from that point on. Say, maybe it's only the palm of the hand that burns. Let's try the back. Yeah, that burns too. Let's try the side. That burns. No, you don't do that. You say, when I put my hand on a hot stove, I burnt it, I learned it right away. That answer is the right answer. So you come up with the right answers that are good for you, but they may not necessarily be good for your creative thinking. Because as you think and as you come up with answers, again, your brain is a busy machine and it's moving on all the time to figure things out. So when you come up with the right answer, it says, right answer, move on. So now you're moving on, and what we tend to do is we tend to put these blinders on. And we say, okay, I've got the right answer. I don't need any more right answers, I'm going to put those blinders on. And I'm going to ignore everything else that comes at me because I've already decided I know what the right answer is. So we develop what they call blind spots. Just like when you drive in your car, someone's coming up from the side, there's a blind spot where you can't see them. Things are right there, things are right in front of you or right beside you, but those blind spots come into play because your brain has made a decision that I understand what it is, I know what it is, I'm moving on to more important things. Let's see if you can relate to this. When I walk into my house, I have a shelf right here where when I go into my house, I take my keys out of my pocket, put them on the shelf. I take my wallet out, put it on the shelf, put my phone on the shelf. All my stuff goes on that shelf right there. The reason is because I forget everything. And if it's on the shelf, I know where it is. So I never have to think about it again. It's always right there. When I leave the house, my keys are there, I grab them, and I'm gone. My wallet's there, my phone's there, everything's there. Except for when they're not. And it drives me nuts because I have to go someplace, I have to be somewhere, I go to grab my keys. My keys aren't there. So the first thing I think of, who took my keys?
Or honey, where are my keys?
We get to that. Where are my keys? I always put my keys there. Therefore, somebody must have taken them. So now I start pawing around, looking, there's nothing on the shelf except 3 or 4 items. And I start looking under each item to make sure my keys aren't there. I said, my keys aren't there, where could they be? And I start looking around the room, but I know my keys are there. So this feeble attempt at finding my keys over here is futile, because I know where my keys are. I always put them on that shelf. So I look around and say, well, maybe I could have put them down someplace else. I don't know where. And I always find myself back at the shelf, looking through the same things again. And they're not there. Still not there. Where could they be? Look around. They're not over there. What did I do with them last? No, they're not on the shelf. Still. And then my lovely wife will come along and say, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for my keys. My keys are always on the shelf.
That she moved.
She must have.
Yeah.
Because they're not there. So somebody had to move them. And she in all her wisdom will say, oh, well, did you look in your truck? Well, of course I didn't look in my truck, because I know they're not in my truck. I always put my keys on this shelf. So the keys have to be on this shelf. Why would I leave them in the truck? Why would I do that? And she says, well, you know, no, they're not in the truck. Can't be in the truck. Not there either. I get starting to get a little frustrated. I need my keys. It's getting late. Where are my keys? My wife picks up my keys over here and says, are these what you're looking for? How'd they get over there? I always put them over here. Who put them over there? And then I take the keys and crawl out the door and go to where I'm going. But what I've done is I've developed blind spots. Because if I know my reality is that the keys are on this shelf, why would I look someplace else? Why would I logically look the places where I wouldn't put my keys? That doesn't make any sense. Do you know how that's how hypnotists fool us? They will hypnotize us, and then they'll say, this weighs 500 pounds. Try to pick it up. Now your mind knows you can't pick up 500 pounds. So you try to pick it up, and you strut, and you strain, and you try to pick it up, and it won't work, because your mind knows you can't pick up 500 pounds. If you could pick up 500 pounds, you'd have to be nuts. If you just went over and said, I know it weighs 500 pounds, nope, that's it. It's a reality that your brain can't handle, that you've picked up 500 pounds when you know you can't. So that's how we keep our sanity, but we also develop those blind spots to not being able to see outside of what we have already decided is the truth. People say that they are not creative, not artistic, not crafty. And if that's their reality, then how can they be anything different? Because if they believe that they are none of those, and then they go off and they be artistic and crafty and artistic, that wouldn't make sense in their world. So therefore they do everything in their power to make sure that they're not artistic, not crafty, not innovative. Even though they may be great gardeners, and they're very artistic in their gardening. Or they might be great cooks, and they're very artistic and creative in their cooking. Or arranging furniture. But if you ask them on that, they'll say, oh, you're very great at gardening. All that, I don't. They'll just fluff it off, because that's not in their reality to be creative. So we get stuck. We get stuck in thinking. I had a friend call me up the other day. It's been a while now. And he said, Bruce, can you help me out? I have a window in the back of my garage that I want to make bigger, because I want to let more light in. I said, oh, okay, sure. So I got my tools, I got my saw and my hammer and square and tape measure and I loaded it in my truck, and I went over to his house. We went in the garage, and there in the back of the garage, sure enough, was a window. And the window was 1 foot high by 1 foot wide. And I said, oh, this is easy. So I took a saw, and I started cutting, and I started right in the middle of the top of the window. And I cut 6 inches to the right. And then I cut 12 inches down, and I cut 12 inches to the left. I cut 12 inches back up, and I cut 6 inches back to the right, which brought me right back to where I started. And I exactly doubled the size of the window. And he was very happy. Don't wrinkle your brow at me like that. I see some people throwing, what the heck are you talking about? Did I not explain it? Let me explain it again. So we had a window in his garage. It's a foot tall by a foot wide. I took a saw, I went to the middle top of the window, and I cut 6 inches to the right, 12 inches down, 12 inches to the left, 12 inches back up, and 6 inches to the right, which brought me right back to where I started. And I exactly doubled the size of the window. Did you get it now?
Oh, you didn't cut the window out, you cut another hole next to it.
No, I cut the window.
What was there?
Excuse me?
Look, I'm trying to do the math in my head here. I think you just cut out what was there. No, listen to me. I know. It was on my permanent record.
And Bobby's is in a pass fail.
I've heard this before, I forgot, I'm damned if I can figure it out again. No?
You ever seen a window like that?
Oh.
You didn't say that.
We assumed.
You assume. Thank you. 1 foot high by 1 foot wide. I cut 6 inches, 12 inches, 12 inches, 12 inches, 6 inches. See, it's not the of how I did it that's important. It's what your perception of a window was, or is. Your perception of a window was, I said, a foot tall by a foot wide, and you assumed it was a square window. Are there more than just square windows?
Well, they're technically
In an old garage. It is a square window, it's just that it was not diagonal.
We're using history.
Using history. So history makes it not correct?
So I'm just thinking of a garage that I knew where the little windows were like that, that's all. to do with the old
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's your picture. When I say window in a garage, you flash back, bring that up and say, oh, I know what a window in a garage looks like. But his window was diamond shaped. Ever seen a round window? Or a rectangular window? Or a rectangular window? Or, you know, a crazy window? So it's not so much the cutting on how we got a bigger window, but it's what our perception of the window was, or is. And that's where we get locked in. That's where we stop ourselves from thinking outside, I hate this term, thinking outside the box. I hate that term, you know? Thinking outside the box. Why is it gotta be a box? Why is it gotta be outside the box? There's no answers inside the box? What's the box made of? Is it a square box? Is it a rectangular box? Talking boxes here. So, anyway, that's a personal thing for me. Does it make sense? That it's your perception. So if you're not creative, how could you be creative? If you don't think you are? I have another story. Full of stories. I had heard of this gentleman who owned a restaurant down in the Bahamas. And it was a very successful restaurant. But one of the biggest issues he had in his restaurant was that the sugar would soak up the humidity and get clumpy. And when it got clumpy, his customers didn't like using it. So eventually what he would have to do was throw the sugar away and put new sugar in the bowls again. And then that would clump up in a short period of time and he would have to dump it again. So he was going through a lot of sugar. So this restaurant owner went to a conference in New York. And one of the things they had at that time in New York was this sugar that comes in these little packages like this. And we all know what these are, right? We see them every day. But at the time, this was revolutionary. And he thought it was tremendous. He said, this is great. This solves all my sugar problems. And he bought several cases of it right then and there and had it shipped back to his restaurant. When he finally got home, he got all his wait staff together and he said, I solved the sugar problem. We won't have clumps in the sugar anymore. We won't be throwing out all the extra sugar. Our customers will be happy. It'll be much easier for us. He said, from now on, we're going to use this sugar on our tables. And I said, oh, great. Okay, wonderful. He said, look, I've got some business to do. And he talked to his restaurant manager and said, I want you to take care of that. I said, okay. So he left for the day. He came in the next day. And he came in the back door, and as he did, he looked in one of the trash cans, and he saw
3,000.
all of these empty packages in the trash. And he was irate. He said, what happened? He called his restaurant manager over to him. What happened? What did you do? He said, sir, I don't know what you mean. We took the sugar that you told us was going to be used on the table from now on, and we put it in the sugar bowls. Obviously, there was a communication breakdown. But if his wait staff had only one reality of what sugar was, the loose sugar, then you really can't blame them for taking all the sugar out of these packages and dumping it in the bowls. Because their reality said that's what sugar is. Why would you put sugar in this stuff, you know? It's going to taste funny when it goes in your drink. So again, it wasn't so much that they did something wrong, or what wasn't right, I suppose, but the reality of sugar was not full enough to take in what he was asking them to do. Same as with the nice diamond-shaped window here. Oh, I got a nice one now. So how do we change our realities? How do we change images? How do we change how we think? One way to do it is to expose ourselves to more or different realities. Right? By talking with different people, by seeing different things, by visiting different places. Every time you do something, every time you go out and experiment with something else, you're adding new realities to your reality. And therefore now you can think differently or make other decisions other than the ones you've been stuck with. Who knows how to make a paper airplane? Shauna, come on.
You wanna make one?
Make a paper airplane out of that. I'll make one out of this. Yeah, I know. Not cheap. Not cheap. Hold up a rail, please. Now, we got two different airplanes here. Which one's the right one? They're both the right one, because they're both our airplanes. Okay? Aerodynamic. Must it fly?
Yeah.
Thank you. This one also serves as a hat. Now, what I've done in that little experiment is I've expanded your knowledge of paper airplanes. So next time somebody says paper airplane, you're going to think, I know how to make a paper airplane. I also have seen other airplanes that are paper. How many people watched this airplane rather than this one? Why?
Different.
Because you wanted to see if it could fly and what the heck I was doing. Right? There's nothing wrong with this. This is a great airplane.
Standard,
It's standard work sometimes.
standard model.
Yeah. But that's how we think. We say, oh, that's interesting. I want to find out more about that. So we watch that airplane, see how it flew,
Yeah.
and say, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to get across is how do you not lock yourself in? Right? How do you think beyond what you already know? It's not easy, because you've developed your whole lifetime of thinking, saying, this is how I think, this is what I do. But by exposing yourself to other things, you can change that thinking. Remember, the world was flat one time? Remember that the universe revolved around the earth at one time? And if you disagreed with that, they would kill you? So you agreed. When I was an art teacher, one of the lessons that I would always do with the kids would be set up a still life. Now, I say, well, everybody does a still life. But what I would do is I would set up a still life, and I would tell the kids that they had to draw the mirror image of that still life. They hated me. Because if I had a bottle and a piece of wood and a shoe and a flower, they all knew what a bottle looked like. They all knew what a shoe looked like. They all knew what a flower looked like. So what they would do is they would look at the still life and say, oh, a bottle. And then they would spend the next 10 minutes drawing a bottle. And then they would say, oh, a shoe. And then, because they knew what a shoe looked like, they would spend the next 10 minutes drawing a shoe, and so on and so on and so on. But where I told them to draw a mirror image, now it made them think. Because the shoe was on this side, and the flower was on this side, and they had to figure out how to flip those and draw them. I got some of the most amazing artwork out of those kids, because now they were really looking at what they were drawing. They all knew what the items were. They knew how to draw those, but not in a flipped state. I had a lot of little tricks like that I would do with the kids. Eventually, they liked me. But it's something to expand what you see, what you know, what you do, right? So that you can take in more than just that one thing. What I like to say is look beyond the obvious. When I'm working with my crap, I'm always holding it up in different positions. I'm turning it upside down. Right? I'm putting it next to things. I'm changing it all around. And I will come up with an idea. But I'll still keep changing it around and looking for another right answer. And then another right answer. Try to figure out, and maybe it was the first one is the one that I want to go with. But maybe it's the last one I want to go with. So it's a matter of keeping changing that and try to go beyond what the obvious is. And I find it challenging. I find it fun. And I have always said is that when the pieces start talking back to you, that's when you know you're on the right track. Because then now you're getting feedback, and your brain has opened up to get that information back in, and it's not locking you out. I have another story. There was a mother who was in the kitchen with her daughter, and they were going to cook a ham. So the mother got out the baking dish and the spices and whatever she was going to put on the ham, and she got it all ready, and then the little girl was talking about what they were going to do and how the meal was going to be prepared, and they were all excited. And just before the mother put the ham in the roasting pan, she took a big knife and cut off about the last 4 inches of the ham and put it aside. And then she put it in the baking pan, she finished with all the spices and threw it in the oven. And the little girl said, "Well, why'd you cut the end of the ham off?" And the mother said, "I don't know. My mother used to always do that. Every time she baked a ham, she would cut the end off. Let's go ask Grandma why she would do that." So they packed up, went over to Grandma's house, and said, we were just cooking a ham, and, I cut the last 4 inches off the ham, threw it in the oven, and then we were talking, "Why do you cut the end off the ham?" And the grandmother said, "I don't know. My mother used to always do that." So, they all packed up and they went to great-grandma's house. Went in and said, "Great-grandma, we were cooking hams. And every time we cook a ham, we cut the last 4 inches off the ham before we put it in the oven. Why do you do that?" She said, "I don't know about you guys, but when I was cooking hams, I had to cut the last 4 inches off because it wouldn't fit into the baking pan." See how those things get passed on? It's just something that you're taught. It gets passed on and passed on and passed on. And sometimes we think, how did I ever latch on to that idea? Well, I don't know, it's your idea. Yeah. I got my own problems. So, has this made any sense about how we can kind of open up our thinking? I mean, I don't have all the answers for you. This is something that hopefully I can just open the door a little bit, and you can see how you can maybe slide through and get some new information. Does it make any sense at all? Oh, good. Because now I get something else.
Now's the test.
Yeah. So what I did is I printed this out because I don't want to screw it up. Because I'm known to do that. So if you can just pass those out. What's that? Oh. I need another one. I can't forget people in the peanut gallery. All right, so this says cross out 8 letters to reveal the name of a common fruit. Now I give you a second or two to figure this out. You know, I love giving these little puzzles because I hate doing them. You know, and again, this kind of goes back to the first one I handed out. If I was handed this, my tendency would be to put no pay value on it and just put it aside, because I don't want to figure it out. Everybody get it? I don't know if you can all see that or not. So the answer was watermelon. Right? So I took out the E and the I and these, then the LE, and then 2 T's and the R and the S. And I left WATERMELON, watermelon.
Awesome.
Y'all get that?
I got lemons too.
Get lemons too?
Because right, but so you cross out the letters, I didn't even have to cross out the letters, I could see it. But then, you're right,
There's
letters-
other fruits in there too.
but they don't all have to be in the same. You didn't say it had to be in the same
That's right.
sequence.
There's no right answer. Except what I get on a lot of this is people will say, Henry, you crossed out more than 8 letters. Yeah, I crossed out 8 letters. So yeah, you crossed out a whole bunch of them. Yeah, I crossed out 8 letters. 8 letters. E-I-G-H-T, L-E-T-T-E-R-S.
Oh, you crossed out more than a letter.
I crossed out 8 letters.
Who's on first?
My mom just got that.
Oh.
I
Did you
love it.
figure that out by yourself?
I love it when
You're
it
not a
finally,
person.
bam.
When did you shock?
when it finally comes on.
The light dawns on my head.
It's like, oh, see, and that's a perfect example. Now it's like, oh, now I see. There's a new reality in town. Right? And everybody hates me for it. I love messing with people's heads. Well, that's my seminar for today. Hopefully, you've learned a little bit about yourselves and how thinking works, and how maybe settling for the first right answer is not the best right answer. It could be, but go beyond that and look for other right answers. Thank you.